Hey, everybody. The topic for Pay Your Dues this week will be a painful one for some folks, one filled with emotions full of anger and bitterness and, frankly, sadness more than anything else. We're talking about the sale of the Seattle SuperSonics almost 20 years ago. Jon Finkel wrote a book on this topic called Hoop Heist, and he chronicles the events that led up to this sale, which, frankly, is still hard to believe even to this day. Jon also does a deep dive on the rich history of the NBA in the Pacific Northwest and the basketball brotherhood that lives on there today. Jon is a talented writer, and we talk about his other books, how he got started as an author, and now that he's a dad, writing about the subject that brings him the most joy, his kids. He's a great storyteller, and whether or not you're a fan of the NBA, there's a lot to enjoy here with Jon Finkel. We'll get rocking. So are you in Florida? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm in South Florida.
Yeah. So there's a lot to talk about basketball, the Sonics, of course, a lot of things, a lot of your writing I want to ask you about, but timely too, because I know you're a big WWE fan
Yeah.
and you wrote the book on Macho Man Randy Savage. And we're about the same age. I remember all those guys, and
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan passed away yesterday. So I got to get your take on the Hulkster and, your thoughts on that news. And you're in Florida, of course. He has a big presence there. So shocking news, but what's your take on the Hulkster?
Yeah, I look at it much the way I look at like a performance artist. Like he was a genius in the ring and in the creating the Hulkamania persona. I grew up just the perfect age to just be all in on everything Hulkster. And
Yes.
so I look at it very much like uh, when you were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in the 80s and on up, and you got into this larger than life thing called wrestling, you had to have been that age at that time to really understand it. I see how people who are, under 25 or 30 are like, who cares? Or they're bringing up all the stuff that are controversial about him. And there is plenty of stuff that's controversial about him. But I look at it as like I'm sort of not so much even mourning, just the nostalgia for that time period. There was nothing like him. He was so big and so charismatic, and the way he wrestled, when he would almost always lose and do the hulking up thing and the finger pointing thing. And like my personal favorite was, anyone listening who's around our age, is when he would almost be submitted and his arm would go down once and twice, and you even know the smile on your face where I'm going, and it would drop again. As anyone who doesn't know wrestling, the third drop hits the ground and the match is over. 2 inches from the ground, it would stop. And the guy who was choking him out would look over and be stunned that it was stopped.
Yeah.
And his fingers would twitch and his wrist and his arm would twitch, and the crowd would go, and he'd start pumping his fist, and he'd slap his face, and he would come back from the dead.
Resurrection. Yeah.
And you get goosebumps as a 10-year-old, or even now, just talking about what that meant, that your hero was up. And then, of course, he would get hit and didn't feel it, shake his face.
Yeah.
And it was art. It was literally like a performance that always delivered. Like pick your favorite artist and the last song they would do for the last encore every time. That was what he did. But you were 10.
Yeah.
And you were just all in. You had nothing else in your life to care about but this. And so that is what I feel like we're all thinking about and nostalgic for. Forget anything basically after, I don't know, 2005. Like just that part of it was amazing. And that's the part that his passing kind of makes you realize, A, how old we are now. And B, like you can only be a kid and be so invested one time. I watch the stuff with my son now.
Yeah.
I love it. I enjoy it. It's like his world. He's 12. There's nothing else.
Yeah.
So you can only be that for 6 to 10 years, and then the world hits you. So that's
it was, Saturday Night Main Event, right? Saturday Night Main Event. That was a connection I had with my dad and watching it. And I wouldn't say I was the biggest fan ever, but I paid attention, and I think my dad saw that I liked it, so we would wrestle in the living room, and he would flip me over, and my heels would land first, so it'd feel like a body slam, but it really wasn't. My mom's yelling like, damn it, Bert, you're going to hurt him. And we're just wrestling and
Yeah.
watching that. And so it brought back a lot of those memories. And then, the Hulk he was on a number of podcasts in the last few years, which I appreciated because I listened to a lot of those. He's on like Rogan and Theo Vaughn, and to hear his stories of traveling to Japan and like, man, that guy lived a wild life and a grinding life, really, in a lot of ways. I mean, he packed a lot into those 71
Yeah,
years.
so I did the Macho Man biography of over 2 years. I interviewed, every wrestler you could think of, not Hogan, who wanted an extremely absorbent amount of money to be talked to
Really?
for any
Yeah,
of
I
this
was going to
stuff,
ask
which
you if
is,
you talked to him for that book.
I did not. I tried very
Yeah.
hard to. If you talk to people inside of wrestling, most of the wrestlers of his era don't have too many nice things to say about him from a behind this. They always praise his performance and what he did for
Mhm.
the business. But most will just go off the record and say they don't have anything nice to really say. So leave it
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah.
Um, and he's like a liar, like he tells, and not in like the sense of like your kid lies or something. Like he's so invested in the character that
Yeah.
so many of his stories are just instantly provably wrong or
Mhm.
false.
Mhm.
So he's so good at it, and you look at him and hear him, and you hear the voice brother, and you're like, wow, every story, he's so amazing, this guy.
Yeah.
And then anyone who's there is like, well, I mean, that would be awesome, except for none of it happened.
Yeah.
He did the traveling and all the things you're talking about. He
Yeah.
definitely built his career in the 70s and 80s, but so many of his quintessential Hogan stories are full of crap.
Their
And just
stories.
there's stories. He's a
Yeah.
performer, right? So you get that,
Yeah.
but I think there's a desire when a guy goes on a podcast where they pull the curtain back and say stuff, and they're going to really be honest.
Yeah.
And so many people I know inside of wrestling who I met writing the Macho Man book would be like, that's just not
Yeah.
how it went down. Like, he's crazy. Like it's
Yeah.
a great story, and it makes him look, the through line is always that the stories make him look harder or tougher or more compassionate or more compelling, but they're rarely true. And so in the Macho book in particular, it was really interesting to talk to Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Tito Santana and Paul Romano and all these guys, and they just were just not talk about him because they didn't want to say anything mean. They just didn't want to
Yeah.
trash him or anything.
How did you land on writing that book? Because you obviously we'll talk about a lot of your books, a long list of sports books, but the Macho Man, I mean, that's a huge personality. And then did he pass away before you published the book, or?
Yeah. So Macho passed away like 2012.
Okay.
His brother Lanny Poffo, Leap and Lanny Poffo, for those listening, who some people still were like, wait, that was his brother. That was his brother. He passed away like in the middle of me writing, in the middle of us doing interviews for the book, which was really sad. I'd gotten to know him a little bit. You don't get to become super friends with a lot of these guys, but we'd spent enough hours talking that I kind of got the feel for the kind of guy he was, and he really held himself as like the torchbearer for the Poffo legacy, because their father, Angelo Poffo, was a big wrestler in the 50s and 60s, and so they were very much a dynasty in that sense. And I had always put together like a bucket. When you're an author, you have just, especially in nonfiction, there's just bucket list biographies you want to write, and some you're just not going to be the person. I would have loved to write like a Ken Griffey Jr. one, but I wasn't going to be for me. That needs to be like a beat writer who covered
Yeah.
him all the time, who was a little bit older than me when he broke in
Yeah.
1989 and all that. It was one of those where it's like, I know that's not one for me, but man, it would be fun to like spend 2 years in his life. Macho, I just knew I could do. Like, I knew I had the chops. I knew I had the exact demographic of growing up in his fan base. And after enough books that I'd done, I knew I had like the actual skill set to do the research and be the journalist to get it all done. So I had pitched it like to a bunch of different places. And nowadays it's very hard to get a sports book made. It's very hard to get a book in this environment on a person called Macho Man, right? It's like,
Right.
it's such a weird world now. And
Yeah.
so I went to a couple publications that had success writing or publishing books on wrestling, and I sold it. And then it took about a year and a half to write, and then 6 months to get ready. And then it came out last year, and it was just the greatest. We went to WrestleMania, and
Yeah.
I got to do, I was on like signing row with like Jake the Snake and
Yeah.
Hacksaw and me, and then we had the book on the big screen at WrestleMania itself. It was just
That's
an amazing
cool.
experience, and I brought my son, who at the time was 11, and all in on all of
Yes.
wrestling. And then we were there for the 2 nights with when Cody beat Roman and The Rock, and Cena came running and Undertaker came running, and it was just a bucket list, like all time remembrance experience for us.
Doing it with your son there too. I mean, just and you do a lot of writing about a dad, which I really being a dad, which I appreciate. But I mean, how cool is that for you
It
as a
doesn't
dad,
get
man?
better. I mean, when I sold the book, the two things that will stand out for me forever of writing the book is one, I did a research trip to Tampa, as you mentioned. So Hulk was a Tampa
Mhm.
resident for a very very long time, and so was Macho Man. They both actually lived very close to each other back in their heyday. They trained together. They were friends. They barbecued together. Their wives were friends in the '90s and early 2000s. Then they famously had a falling out. But Macho lived there and spent the last several years of his life there after he'd left wrestling in the public eye. And so I drove up there, and one of the things was to see where his last condo was, his last house was, and also I wanted to go get some research on where he died. If anyone, if you're listening, you don't know, he died in a car accident. He had a
Mhm.
heart attack while he was driving, crossed over a median. Is actually his wife is who's still alive, is still with us. Basically saved a bunch of people's lives in oncoming traffic. Like
Mhm.
he passed out like face first into the wheel. She like with his foot on the gas, like accelerating. She like dove forward and grabbed the wheel, and they ran into this tree off the side of the road and saved them from like just going into oncoming traffic. Anyway, that tree is still there and it's just on some guy's property, and it's become a de facto like memorial for Macho. And so I had heard online that if you go um, to this day, there's Macho things there, and you
Yeah.
never know. So I went and drove up with my daughter, and the whole time, at the time, she's 2 years older than my son, so she was probably like 12. My son was 10. But I just took my daughter for this trip, um, and I'm telling her about Macho and the whole thing. And the tree is very hard to find. I mean, it's on a main road in the middle of like Seminole County. It's not near
Mhm.
anything big, next to an old church, next to an old Waffle House or whatever. And you kind of have coordinates, like it's by this turn and over this thing, but it's an unmistakable tree. And finally, we find it. She gets all excited, and I'm like, she's like, "Is going to be something there?" And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to. I'm going to knock on the door of the guy, do some journalist, but like maybe. And we get out of the car and we're walking close. All of a sudden, she starts running. And at the base of the tree, there's two Macho Man figurines. There's purple tassel all wrapped around the tree.
Yeah.
There's stickers of his sunglasses all over the tree.
Yeah.
And it was just the coolest. Like, she's like, "Oh my God, look at all this stuff. People love him. They still love him.
Yeah.
There's stuff everywhere." And I got all these pictures of it. Um, and then I went and knocked on the door of the guy who lived there, and he was home, and he told us what the day was like. And that's the stuff that, like, my daughter got to ask questions and was
Yeah.
involved in the process. And I'll never forget that part of the writing of it. And then obviously the second part of, my son watched every old WrestleMania with me to research this thing, all the YouTube stuff,
Yeah.
all the clips for months and months. And then getting to go to WrestleMania, he met Jimmy Hart and showed him the book. And we really had those moments. So
Yeah.
you can't beat it as a dad with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. And I know you've written some magazine or blog posts about, WWE with your son and that connection. So that's really cool. I want to ask you about the Sonics book, Hoop Heist, because that's how I found my way to you. And then I've since realized I've read your stuff in other places too. I am curious how a guy, now living in Florida ends up writing a book about Seattle basketball because it is about the sale, and I have lots of thoughts and questions on it, but it is a great history of Seattle basketball. I mean, because I'm from the Northwest, I covered the Sonics for 5 years and the Huskies in the Nate Robinson era of that time. So we'll talk about that. So I'm very familiar with it, and I just loved the history going back to Lenny Wilkins and the first championship or the championship and all of that. So, how did you find your way to that topic, first of all?
Yeah, well, you can thank Nate the Great, first of all.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I thought.
Nate and I came across each other, or I came across his path when I was writing for Muscle and fitness or men's health, one of the two. I can't remember.
Uh-huh.
But I did a whole series of stories on like, the magazine titles. It was like how to be superhuman or whatever. But it was basically like we talked to the strongest bench press guy and the fastest 40-yard dash guy, and one of them was the get your vertical up to whatever.
Yeah.
So I reached out through just regular channels, someone at the time he was with a Goodwin Management or somebody like that. And I just
Uh-huh.
reached out to someone who knew someone who I wrote a pitch like, hey, we're doing this feature. And at the time we had some pretty big names, some body, we had like Mr. Olympia doing the bodybuilding one. And so I said, I'd love Nate to be the person in the series to do that, like how to jump, like what do you do, 3-time slam dunk champion, all that stuff. And they said, okay, that was it. Very simple. We did a million magazine pitches like that. And we had our normal conversation, and then we just sometimes it happens with this stuff where you just start talking. He had
Yeah.
had his kids were younger, my kids were younger. He's just I don't know, you probably met him, or he's just a
Uh-huh.
charismatic guy
For
anyway.
sure.
He's just a uniquely charismatic person to talk to. And we were talking about sneakers, he's into sneakers, and we were talking about the dunk over Dwight Howard and all this stuff. And I said, thank you. I appreciate this. Let's stay in touch, which, we had each other's cell phone numbers back then. And that was it. And so the article came out, and, I always, you expect nothing. If you interview somebody, especially a professional athlete, they don't, most of the time, as you probably know, they don't do anything. They're not going to
Yeah.
say good article or
Yeah.
appreciate, they don't do anything. Right. So that piece came out, and I actually got like a text from him, like, and if Nate, he talks like this, he's like, bro, that was legendary. Like, whatever. And I was like, thanks, man. Like, I really appreciate, like, it's doing very well for us too. I'm glad you read it. And I sent it to him, of course, but
Yeah.
that's just sort of a courtesy. And then that May, the NBA playoffs happen, and he's with the Bulls. And if you remember the NBA back then, he had like a 2-week run
Yeah.
where he was the talk of the NBA.
Yeah.
Like, he had these crazy fourth quarter performances with 10 or 12 points in overtime one night. He outdueled LeBron. It was because he was on that Bulls team with Joakim Noah was hurt, and who else? There was a bunch of guys that were out, and it was like
Uh-huh.
basically him. And he carried them, and they beat the Nets in the first round, and then they lost obviously LeBron. But one of the games he like outdueled LeBron. He had,
Uh-huh.
I can't remember the numbers, but it was like 8 to 10 points in the fourth and 7 or 9 in overtime. And it was like Nate the Great is like,
Yeah.
how is he not on a team? And so, then they lost because they obviously weren't that good to begin with, that team anyway, because with so many guys. So I think Thibodeau was coaching it. So just
Yeah.
for, it was already almost 15 years ago. It's crazy. But for anyone
Yeah.
listening who's younger, those are relevant people now still. It's not old
Yeah.
time.
Right.
And so I just text him like, hey man, like, legendary playoff run. Like, as a kid who was like Mr. Basketball and Mr. Football in Seattle, in Washington, like, you had the dunks and all that. I wrote like just what I truly felt. I was like, if you ever think of like a book, I think you would be the most inspiring guy, because he did come from the pretty rare spot of,
Uh-huh.
not only like humble beginnings from like a socioeconomic perspective, but size wise, like,
Right.
and then taking on two sports. I just thought his story was inspiring. And he was like, and he literally, I have it somewhere. He was like, bro, let's do it. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So then there was, a month of negotiations and who was going to publish it and how we would do it. And then literally, I'm going to say the next thing I know, because it was within 6 weeks, I was in Seattle doing his book. We spent a week together. And it came out, I think, a year after that. And so anyway, all that is to say, we've stayed in touch. And one of the guys that worked with him is basically this guy TJ, who works with a lot, who was friendly with and works with a lot of those guys in media in Seattle. And through them, I met Isaiah Thomas,
Uh-huh.
who's like basically, the torchbearer of like from Nate to Isaiah. And there's some other guys in there, Crawford and some other guys from that
Yeah.
area, but size wise and things like that, they were on the same level. Um, and then so Isaiah was like, I want to do a book, but not about me. I want to do like a love letter to Seattle basketball. There's
Oh,
no book
cool.
like that. And so that's how it came about.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how I found you. I was
Yeah.
researching Isaiah because I thought, oh,
Yeah.
he'd be a good guest for this, knowing his
Yeah.
story and perseverance, right? Talk about paying your dues. And
Yeah.
so I'm researching him. And then I see Slow Grind is his brand. I look at that. And then it's Slow Grind Media and Publishing. Then there's this book, Hoop Heist, and it's you. And so was Isaiah's company that the one that published it, or how does that
Yeah.
work?
So I've done mostly, traditionally published books with whatever Simon Schuster. I don't know, pick your, if you know who any of the big five they call them in
Uh-huh.
publishing. But with the way tech is going and the way production is going, a lot of, I don't know, celebrities, I'll say, are in a position where they can start their own imprint if they have a brand in place. So,
Mm.
as you mentioned, he had Slow Grind Media. So it was like we started game planning, all right, we could pitch this and most likely sell it with him involved. And we had already lined up, um, Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, and George Karl, and Kevin Durant, and Jamal Crawford, any basketball player from Seattle or who played with the Sonics, almost at any time we were going to be able to get in touch with because of Isaiah, 100% because of him and his
Uh-huh.
connections. And so knowing that, I knew we could probably get in advance and probably get it, but you lose total IP control in terms of when the book comes out, cover design. I mean, even if they said yes, it's like, okay, great, it'll come out in 2 years. And we wanted to just get it out based on our own schedule. At the time, Isaiah was still, I hate to say kicking around the league, but still
Yeah.
signing, end of season contracts and
Right.
those kinds of things. And so we just wanted to get it out as like a thing that was he could speak on over the summer, bring to his camps, but also on a media side, talk about the amazing people, basketball players from Seattle, what happened to Sonics, like that kind of thing. And so we decided the best thing to do would be to do it through Slow Grind Media. So we created an imprint, and it went really, really well. I mean, we sold a ton of books, and he still owns it, and they're still
Uh,
shopping it for a documentary and all those kinds of cool things, and he still owns the whole thing.
yeah.
So that was why we went that route.
Yeah, that's cool. I just want to go back to Nate Robinson for a quick minute because I think there's a second book there, obviously with his kidney
Yeah.
replacement that he had this year. And I mean, it sounds like it's gone
Mm-hmm.
well. But, my experience with Nate was, as I said, I was a sports reporter in Seattle for those 5 years at the CBS station. And Nate was a senior in high school. And
Okay.
I didn't really, we covered high school sports, but really wasn't honestly paying attention to like, what an athlete he was. And we showed highlights of him on the Friday night football highlights. And like, God, this kid's amazing. And their athletic director reached out. We had him on our, a 30-minute special we did. And afterwards, I'm talking to him. He's a senior in high school. And he's like, yeah, basketball's next. And, that's where I'm really going to shine. And I'm like,
Yeah,
all right.
I know.
And I'm like, hey, and that's with his teammates were Lodrick and Roderick Stewart. They were the
The twins.
headlines,
Yeah, yeah.
the twins,
Yep.
right? And so
Yep.
I'm like, all right, man, cool. I'm thinking like, this guy's 5'8", maybe, like, let's see
Amazing.
what he
Yeah.
does. And of course he lit it up. But I remember going out to one of their practices at Rainier Beach that season. And John, like it was like these guys were in warm up. It was Lodrick, Roderick, Nate, other guys. I don't remember their names. They would bounce the ball off the wall behind the backboard, catch it and dunk it. I mean, this is just in,
Phil Heath, the
yeah.
Mr. Olympia, was there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're right. They had that big guy. And they were stacked and I mean, it was just crazy athleticism. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is amazing. And then covered him at the UW. I was at the Apple Cup game where he had the major
Oh man,
interception.
that was like his
Uh,
highlight.
yes, I was right there for, and all of that. So, to watch him succeed has been really fun, and I think a lot of people in Northwest feel that way. And I think, yeah, there's probably a second book back out there, but he's a very unique personality, but one of many that you feature in that book. I mean, there's so many personalities from Seattle,
Yeah.
and yeah, I just wanted to mention that about Nate. He's just a good
No,
dude.
people have no idea how athletic he
Yeah,
was. Um, he could have he got recruited by and could have been, if he'd chosen to, would have been on Pete Carroll's USC teams as a
yeah,
starting corner for them.
yeah,
His visit was with Reggie Bush, Lendale White. Like that was he could have played there.
yeah,
He had a full ride offer. He could have played at Arizona. He had offers in football from Notre Dame, I think Michigan, and then the only school he decided late in the process that he just wanted to play both. Um, and the only school that would let him do both like full time was Washington. I think maybe Arizona would have. Lute Olson had some rules about not missing certain things if he was going to be on the basketball team, and that kind
uh-huh.
of turned him off, not so much from Luke, but just from this is how it's, because I was like Miles Simon and Mike Bibby, and like these were massive it wasn't like he was going to go play, and I'm not knocking these schools, but like, Richmond, and then do, like, he was at
Right.
major programs. And so the fact that he did it and was really good, and by all accounts would have 100% gone to the NFL. I mean, there was no doubt, probably would have been a kick returner too, a
Yeah.
punt returner. And then the fact that after the year at Washington, scouts were like, "You're being stupid. Like, you should stay with football." He's like, "Nah, I'm gonna go to the NBA." Even at that level, they were like, "I don't know,
Yeah.
man."
Yeah.
And he was like, "I'll show you." And then he went to the NBA. Like, it's just the I know you're born with athletic talent. There's a lot of 5'8" guys who, no matter what they do, will never dunk. I get all of that, but you got to have some guts and some grit and some real, like, almost self-delusional confidence to
Yes.
do what he did. And then the work, man, the work this guy put in, even when I talked to his teammates, like, he would do a full football practice. And when it would end and the guys would go in the locker room and do the cold tubs, whatever, he would jog over to the basketball arena, the facility there, the Heck Arena, whatever it's called. I
Yeah.
can't remember.
Heckhead
Heck Ed,
Pavilion.
yeah.
Yeah.
He would get all his hoop stuff off, keep his football pants on, and he had, I can't remember the number, but he said every day, so he didn't lose his baskets, he would get 500 shots in,
Yeah.
not up, in, or something. And I was like, that's what 18-year-old does that?
Yeah. Yeah,
And go to school,
yeah, and go to school and do it all. And I remember
Right.
when he chose basketball, thinking like, really? Because I don't think his first year was huge with the UW, in basketball, but then clearly after that, I mean, he
He
took
had
over.
he said that he was too bulky. He came
Yeah,
off of football. I don't remember the weight, but let's say 20 pounds, 15 pounds heavier. And at
yeah,
that size, it's, you might think for, I don't know, someone like Julius Peppers, like, who cares? Like, he
right.
comes off football and he's a 6'4", 270. It doesn't matter if he's 260 or 270, but for Nate, who probably walked around back then at 175,
Yeah,
180, if he's closer to 200, that's a big deal on the basketball court to be
yeah.
5'8". So once he committed to just hoops, I think he dropped 10 or 12 or 15 pounds and became that speed became his thing again.
Yeah, that was a fun team to watch. Okay, Sonics Hoop Heist, certainly a big part of that is the sale, which still painful for people in the Northwest, man, and the Thunder win the championship this year. So there's a lot of talk about it. And, it does look promising for a team coming back here, but man, this was almost 20 years ago. And, reading the book, opened up some old wounds, led me to the Sonic Gate documentary. And on the sale, you probably didn't get a chance to talk to Howard Schultz on it. I mean, you probably tried and you got shot
Yeah,
down
those
and
guys,
yeah,
and we knew going in that, like, none of the principals in the sale, the owners, were going to have anything to
yeah,
do with this
yeah,
book, largely because all the NBA players are one directionally critical of the whole damn thing, right?
yeah,
So it's like, and everything they said, there was so much in the public record that I didn't even think it was all, but whatever it was would have been like, I don't know, like whipped cream on, crap, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
it was like it already happened. You're just covering your ass right now. It's
yeah,
not actually how you felt at the time. And also the time, I think, has been damaging to Schultz and been damaging to Bennett, and because they were both on the record as saying it's not going anywhere, that's
yeah,
not our intention, it's not what we're going to do. Oh, they won't give us this arena. But like, the thing that bugged me, not even from being from there, I grew up in Boston and Celtics fan. We don't, never had an issue of losing our team or anything like that. But when they would put these absurd arena proposals together to get turned down on purpose so that
yeah,
they could say we're putting our best foot forward, even
yeah,
though everyone in the know was like, no, you're not. These are guaranteed rejected before they're even presented. They don't count as a good faith thing.
right.
Um, it's just awful. I mean, I know it's just a sports team and in the big world of whatever, but it's a civic thing, and it just was taken.
So that's the point that sticks with me is the civic thing. And I don't think there was something on it that I've always thought since that, and I wasn't covering the team at that point. I had moved on, but something that I don't think gets discussed enough is how the city effed up the whole thing. Like the sentiment, and I'm not making excuses for Howard Schultz. I think he totally regrets it. I think he would do it completely differently. And you know, um, He'll have to live with it the rest of his life. But there was the president of the city council. I went back and looked it up. I don't know if you remember this, but Nicola Cotta, a
Mhm.
city councilman, was quoted as saying that the Sonics provide, quote, close to zero cultural value. This was in
Yeah.
the months before the sale. He was, because people at that point, I remember people were tired of owners asking for money, right? Because we had funded the Mariners, we had funded the Seahawks, and those passed by less than 1%. So
Right.
they were very somewhat controversial, right? And at that point, right or wrong, people, were not, they were kind of tapped out, right? And so I think fans got behind the Sonics almost too late. Like the
The
ship had
last,
sailed.
it's weird. Everything as a as a sports fan, the way they behaved from a win loss standpoint was completely justifiable. They had dismantled those late 90s teams of
Right.
Peyton and all those guys. They had bottomed out. They did get Durant, which seemed to be the future. They had a couple years there right before that with Rashard Lewis and some of those guys they were Ray Allen. There were some fun teams, but after that, it had clearly bottomed out. So the fans were annoyed at management, at the GM move.
Mhm.
There were rumblings of the team being sold, so that was the problem. And so the low attendance numbers are sort of just what happens in the cycle of a team being bad.
Yes.
It just so happened that that exact time the sale actually was going to happen. And for a councilman or whoever to say they had no civic value, it's almost like kicking a dog when they're down for a minute. And after all the titles and all the things that they've done for the city, and I think they completely misread the seats in the arena for the sentiment about the team in the city.
Yes. Well, when you talk about the cultural value of that team, I mean, in reading your book, it's very obvious the cultural value that the Sonics had with to Jamal Crawford, Isaiah
Yeah.
Thomas, right? All these Doug Christie, Jason Terry. I mean, this
Yep.
deep, and you go into great detail, but these guys were like in elementary school, and guys were coming to their school and talking, and then in the summers, I mean, as they got older, I mean, Jamal Crawford's playing with Gary Payton in these pickup games and all these
Mhm.
things. So I mean, the cultural value is very apparent, in your book, right? I mean, and I think that's what's sad about the whole thing is that's been lost, right? I mean, we've had
There's
20
a
years without it.
generation now, and people will talk about the storm or whatever, and I don't think it's not relevant in the sense that it doesn't have anything to do with Seattle basketball. It's just
It's
there's
different.
no
It's different.
cultural. Yeah, I
It's
mean, there's no.
history.
Yeah,
I mean, the history you go into with Lenny Wilkens and all he did for that team.
yeah,
They just did a statue outside of Climate Pledge Arena of Lenny Wilkens, who I think is 85 now. They
yeah.
did that about a month ago. I mean, that just your history on Lenny and what he meant to the team, right, as a player and a coach, and bringing that first championship,
Yeah.
um, and then reliving the Peyton and Kemp days and all that.
But even like that's what's so cool about the basketball team is that every decade in Seattle has that marketable person and team, and most cities don't get that. Even if it's not a championship, you have guys like Slick Watts who for
Yeah,
these
right.
little 3-year periods become just mega stars locally, right?
Yeah,
90 most basketball fans don't even know in general who Slick Watts is, but
yeah,
for a brief period of time, they're like, he's the mayor of Seattle. He can do
yeah.
anything he wants. He is the most popular guy here with his cocked headband, and his headband was why Jason Terry wore his headband. And it's like, you just have to appreciate it when you do that kind of the research, and you kind of fall in love with the through line of the team. I grew up on the opposite coast. For me, the big connection in the beginning was Bill Russell, obviously coming in as a big name head coach, moving to the West Coast. So that was my sort of Celtics connection. But as I went deeper and deeper into it, and really chronologically, when they finally got the teams that I grew up really watching myself, that I was old enough to watch Kemp and Detlef and Gary Payton and all those guys, you realize that that was like the fourth iteration of a team that had kind of taken the city by storm.
Yes.
And they could have won, they should have won against Jordan and all that. But it is sad, and hopefully they do get a team back. And I hope when they do, they embrace. Oh, I'm sure it's going to be called the Sonics. I can't imagine they would be
Yeah.
stupid enough to do something else. But like that they just embrace, like try to pick up You know what I mean? Like bring
Yeah.
all those guys back
Oh,
for whatever opening night.
I think
Do it
that's what's
right.
going to happen. I mean, those guys
Yeah.
are all those players that you interviewed know, like they can't wait for it to have Spencer Hawes. I mean, they're always,
Yeah.
they're always talking about it and posting about it. The other thing, I don't want to lose sight of this. I want to get my last little dig in on David Stern. I don't think he did Seattle any favors,
No.
man. I think that
No.
guy, I think he got upset with our politicians and he used Seattle as an example. And it, it backfired on Seattle. And then our politicians left Clay Bennett off the hook with the lease. I mean, it's just the whole thing. You look back at it and you're like,
Thanks.
how did this happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It stinks. And you know, when you look back, especially with a little bit of time, and you're like, it's just all unnecessary. None of it
Right.
had to happen. It was
Yeah.
just there were some improvements, but the thing that I've learned in researching lots of books is that one option is to always do nothing. Like maybe the arena was a disaster financially, maybe it wasn't. Maybe the lease was bad, maybe it wasn't. Maybe
Uh-huh.
the luxury suites should have been this, the attendance should have been that. But you can always be like, let's revisit this in 3 years.
Mhm.
And I think of all the options and all the things that were going on, nobody in the political side of it just said, you know what, let's just
Yeah.
hold on. There's
Yeah.
no rush to move the team. And if we're about to move the team, there's no rush to do that. If that ends up happening, fine. But they were submitting proposal out in this frenzy because they knew Clay Bennett was trying to do what he was trying to do. But someone somewhere could have just come out and said, hey, you said you were keeping the team here. There's no clock anywhere that's saying otherwise. We'll talk about this. And I remember the date, but in 2012,
Yeah.
whatever. Like we're going to revisit this in 3 years. You're going to hold you to this lease. You're going to stay here. We're all going to stand pat. See how Kevin Durant is. See how this works out. Whatever. And I just in history, politics, and everything, there's no like appreciation for just let's all take a breath.
And think about that timeline because they moved in what 2007,
Mm-hmm.
2008. The financial world falls apart.
Yep.
Aubrey McClendon, the co-owner, his net worth crumbles, right, because of his oil or whatever he was invested in. So if the city hadn't let them move early, who knows what would have happened, And we part of that deal was, they pay, I don't know, 25 million up front, and then they'll pay another 30 million in 5 years if Seattle hasn't funded a new arena at that point. Well, if
Mm-hmm.
they haven't funded a new arena at this point, why would they do it in the next
Oh,
5 years
it was
after
all
the team's
stacked. And
gone?
imagine too. It's hard because it's all alternate timeline stuff. But imagine everything. The team stays and all the drafting stays the same. All of a sudden, this is all happening in let's say 2010 and 11, and it's Kevin Durant and Russell
Right.
Westbrook and James
Yes.
Harden and Serge
Yes.
Ibaka, and you're selling out and they're going to the finals. That team's not moving.
Right. That's a great point. Okay, so I've had my therapy on the Sonics, I think, and a lot of that. But I do think it's really fun to kind of read about it, and you have to relive it as a fan. But also, I want to point out that book before I ask you about other books is the history of Seattle basketball. And I think why it's so relevant to people beyond Seattle is these characters in there are not just like basketball players, but they're people that had big imprints on the NBA and the community, like Jason Terry, Isaiah Thomas, right? Brandon Roy came back to Garfield and led him to high school
Mm-hmm.
championships. I mean, Jamal Crawford is, you know, like a commissioner of the
He's
NBA
the big man
amongst
on campus for the whole state.
yeah, for the whole state, and he knows everybody, every player, right? And there's so much respect for him. So you go into a lot of detail. I mean, did you was it I guess was it fun learning, those details and adding that to the book? Because I think it really adds a lot to it.
It was awesome. The best stories were the stories about how they all knew each other before they were
Yes.
famous or before they were in the NBA, and how, like you had mentioned earlier, like you would have, in the order of the lineage, it was like, Jamal Crawford had a camp that Jason Terry went to, and then Jason Terry had a camp that Nate went to, and then Nate went to the camp with, Isaiah, who was a little bit younger when he was coming back from the NBA. And so like they all kind of tie together. And then the high school rivalries, even if they didn't specifically play at the same exact time, but like the Tacoma rivalry with the
Right.
Rainier Beach and Seattle rivalry, and like, I mentioned it earlier. I didn't know, like, Slick Watts finished and then went and coached or worked as like a gym teacher at a high school, and that was Jason Terry's school.
Yeah.
And so he got inspired by Slick, and he wore the headband because of him. And like, these guys stayed in the community, they stayed giving back into the camps and all that. And even to this day, I think Nate's kids went to Rainier Beach, and like,
Yeah.
the guys stay where they are. Whereas most cities don't have that. That the guys take off and they don't so much that, they'll maybe be involved with the pro team per se, but not the community at large forever, in terms of their kids and their families growing up and all that. So the unseen through lines of these guys before, I didn't know before researching it, was kind of my favorite little nuggets to discover. Oh, you guys, knew each other. Like, Jason
Yeah.
Terry used to like babysit Isaiah with his
Yeah.
family because they're like, I can't remember, their cousins or some weird thing. And like, who's this little kid shooting hoops in my backyard? And it's like Jason Carey inside with Isaiah outside, and like, just those kind of things, and how they're connected, and how they all look to Jamal as like an uncle.
Yeah.
And then, how he looks at the other guys the same way, and how, can't remember which one of the guys, but like when they were in middle school, like the Sonics used to do this thing where they would like take you to a game. Maybe if you won something at a school, and like,
Right.
I'm blanking on which one of the players it was,
Yeah. I
but like,
remember the writing about that.
X-Man and
Yeah.
somebody else showed up at his house to like
Yeah.
escort him, and it was like,
Yeah.
that ended up being a guy in the NBA, one of the
Yeah.
Seattle guys. It was really cool.
Yeah. And I forgot Doug Christie and Spencer Haas. I mean, they're just this lineage,
Yeah, Doug
that goes
Christie's like
back.
literally like the godfather of all that
Yeah, he
stuff.
started all of it, Rainier Beach. And then, Jamal still brings the crossover tournament he does in the summer. I mean, he's brought like LeBron and I
He's got
mean,
so much respect around the league. Yeah. Yeah.
everybody's come back to that. So it's part about the sale, but a lot of it about the history of the Sonics. And there's a lot of momentum, and it'll be a big deal when the Sonics get back on here, but it'll be 20 plus years. But I mean, if they can even get a team and get going by 28, that'll be over 20 years. So
Crazy. I
we're
know.
long overdue for that. So, okay. So the other connection that the through line I found with you that I realized after I read your book and we lined this up was I was, I had on, Greg Scheinman on here for Midlife Male book, and he was on the
Oh,
podcast a couple months ago. And
nice.
then I'm reading on, I follow Midlife Male and the magazine, and I've been reading articles there, not really realizing that you were writing them. And you're the
That's
editor in
so funny.
chief
Yeah,
of
I
that.
didn't. Yeah, me and Greg he founded it, and then we've been launching it together.
Yeah,
I'm editor in chief of that, and for the last over plus year plus, Greg and I have known each other for a very long time. It was funny. I was talking right before this. I didn't mention specifically what I had. I just said I had a podcast coming
yeah.
up. But I didn't know you guys had
Yeah,
talked
well, I
already.
didn't
So
know
yeah,
when it lined this up with you, and then I was, what it was? I was reading your so for those that follow the show, they'll know Greg Scheinman in Midlife Male, and I loved his book, and I loved the magazine, which you are the editor in chief of. I find out now that comes out, and great articles, which a lot of your dad's stuff is in there, which of course I love. Um, but it was the piece you did on the road trip.
yeah,
It was like, so you wrote this piece on road trips, and I literally the week before I just got back from a road trip with my two daughters, teenagers, a lab in a Sprinter van, and we
oh, so
went
you
to
know,
Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, the national parks. So I know, and the stuff you wrote about is like seeing other dads on the road, and people pass you, and you want to pass
yeah.
them later, and we're not stopping unless we need to, like. Was good. So anyhow, I just, want people to check that out. But how have you enjoyed writing about fatherhood, and being a dad, being a midlife male, I guess. And you've really, I think you've really found a niche there.
Yeah, it's been fun. It evolves obviously because when you start writing, well, at least when I did, I was married and have kids and have any of this stuff. So you write. I wrote. I've always written about what's in my life, right? So I started writing for magazines. Men's Fitness, Muscle Fitness, Men's Health, all those magazines, and I was on staff at Men's Fitness and Muscle Fitness for a long time. And so back then, I was like kind of like the athlete guinea pig. We'd hear about a workout, I would just do it, or I would go train with someone for a week and write about it. I was like I won't say George Plimpton because I wasn't at his level or anything like that, but like that kind of thing. Like, oh, let's
Hmm.
do. I had a strong swimming background, so when the Olympics would come around, I would do like a week of Michael Phelps workouts and write about how they were. Or we do track workouts, and I would just get training for the 40-yard dash with a couple NFL combine guys, and like I would do those things. And as I got older, I'm doing less of those and more of just life and having kids and all that. So I started writing more about that. And it like my books are more like the large, biographies of Charlie Ward or books
Right.
on Hoops Heist or Mean Joe Greene or Macho Man or whatever. But the day-to-day columns that I would write have just evolved with what I've been doing in my life. And so as you get older, Greg and I have known each other for a long time, and there's just a missing thing for all of us who read Esquire and GQ and Men's Health in our
Right.
20s, and every guy you knew had them on their nightstand back when magazines mattered. We're all still around, but there's nothing there to read. So we had been talking for a while about like bridging that gap of like, okay, now we're all over 40, and maybe we don't need to read the article on how to throw the greatest bachelor party and how to get the summer six pack. It's more of road trips and
Right.
how to set up this and talking about like why our generation is this way or what to do with your kids doing that or even just finance or fashion or fitness or whatever. um, and so it was like a natural thing to do. So it's natural to me. It's not really like a concerted effort because I've always written about what I'm doing, whether it's trying to dunk back when I'm 23
Hmm.
or bike riding to school with my kid now. It's just all what it is. So I like it, and it's writing it for me is always the most fun when it's in my own voice and a natural thing. And then the books are always a whole different like passion to do.
Yeah. And you found your way to writing through doing smaller pieces, is that right? And you kind of had to hustle your way. I mean, this is called pay
Oh
your
yeah.
dues, so I like to hear about, the come up, right?
Oh
So
man.
you were
Yeah.
hustling to get your name out there.
Yeah. It was hard, man. I mean, it was like right at the beginning of the internet. So I started like 2000 and I wanted to be like Rick Riley or Steve
Yeah.
Rushin or that was it. And it was very hard back then to break into Sports Illustrated. I always liked the fitness side, so I decided to try to break into the fitness magazines and all that. And so um, I was I had an internship when I moved to LA because I thought I wanted to maybe write movies or something, but I just wanted to change things up. And I was writing for like the Santa Monica Sun for like a penny a word, like literally like a full week of work, and I'd get a check for like $86 or something crazy. And I was interning at Comedy Central for the Man Show, and like that wasn't any money. So I was working at there was a like an old not it wasn't a Blockbuster, it was like a 2020 video. I was teaching swim lessons, just doing what
All
you
the
do at
hustle.
20.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then I pitched an article to Men's Fitness on how to dunk a basketball. And back then, you would basically be paid per word. It was like print was like if you were solid, you could get $1 a word. If you were really good too, and there were people who could command $4 a word. So if you're writing a 2,000 word piece at $4 a word, and you get one of those a month at 22 or 23, like that's a living. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Right.
And I know it seems crazy now because everything's online and they'll give you $10 to write something in a major magazine or whatever. But back then that was the goal, and then eventually to get on staff. And so I got my first pitch I ever sent to Men's Health sold. Like I
The
just
first
couldn't believe.
one.
I sent it snail mail. I literally had to print it up, write out the address. It wasn't even in an email. This was 2000. I send it. I got home the next day. I had a message on my phone, like my actual answering machine in my
Yes.
house, which again, how dated it is, from the editor in chief. He's like, I don't usually do this, but like I got this great article with a great open about you trying to dunk, and I think it's perfect. Let's do it. So I'm like, this is so easy, man. Like you just send night ideas and you get it. And I think I made, I don't know, $800 from that or something. And I didn't get an article placed for like 4 months. I mean, I was for my next 25 pitches, like
Wow.
questioning every single thing that I was doing. And it was very frustrating. And then that article finally came out. And back then there was a long lead time
Yes.
between print. You do something, and it's not like now where you can do this right now and put up tomorrow or this afternoon. It was like the article's done, kid, and you'll see it in November. was just like, sucks so much. But when it came out, I was finally able to use it. So I packaged my bylines at the Santa Monica Sun and the Brentwood News, and I was doing, just going to cover town hall meetings and police softball games and all the stuff that you used to have to do to build your way up, building up bylines basically. And then I packaged that story with the dunking. I did a piece on the like the courts where they filmed White Men Can't Jump, like down in Venice, like what it was like to play ball there for a day,
Yeah.
like the stories I told you. That was a really
Yeah.
fun
That's
story.
cool.
And I packaged them all together and started pitching bigger and bigger places. And I got a second piece with Men's Fitness, and I'm condensing like years of struggling, but
Sure.
one piece led to another, and then I finally got my way to like be a regular contract writer for them. And along the way, I started pitching some book ideas with some local places, and I landed this series called Greatest Stars of the NBA. The NBA in like 2001 announced a big initiative with their Read to Achieve program, where they wanted to do like, they were like graphic novels, but like biographies of their biggest players, and they were narrated by this two Beavis and Butthead type guys
Mhm.
called T Minus and Little Hops. I remember naming them. Anyway, and I landed the book. I landed the first two, and then they gave me the next 10. So I did 12 books, 4 a year for 3 years, and they're still awesome. And that finally gave me like, okay, I'm gonna be doing this.
Yeah.
I have a steady job in a magazine. I have this book thing. This is what people do when they
How
have
many
careers
how
in
many
writing.
years is that, John? Would you say that
Uh,
struggle?
at least three,
Yeah.
at least 3 years. And I did so many oddball. I wrote for this thing called Hoops Hype, which was it ended up getting bought by USA Today, but I wrote Hoops Hype for $75 a word. It was like early online stuff. I wrote for GQ. I had a column in GQ for about 9 months, which was really, really fun.
Mhm.
I wrote for Men's Health. You're just freelancing, but
Yeah.
freelancing is fun until it's not, because it sucks. You could get a bunch of work or not, and you're taking taxes out, and you have to learn how to run a business and chasing down invoices, and it's just not the lifestyle, and you're not getting really big wins. The books was the first big win that I had. I think the first one came out in 2003, and that really changed for me. I was always not the smartest guy, but I was always able to like take the one thing I did and leapfrog to the next thing that I did. So when I got that one byline, I'd already decided I'm going to take this, package it with these two stories, and I'm going to pitch this to Men's Health, and then I'm going to pitch this editor. He's going to start appreciating that I work and I hand things in on time and I have good ideas, and then he's going to give me the next thing, and then I'm going to pitch a series. I always kind of knew how I wanted to do that, and then I failed most of the time, but the ones that succeeded, I was able to really make like an anchor for what I wanted to do.
Well, what I take from that is I try to think about, what can people learn from that journey, right? And I take that there's consistency, right? There's a proactive nature to what you're doing. There's dealing with rejection, and
Oh yeah,
this just keep going, right? Because you didn't start off writing the Hoop Heist book. That wasn't your first thing, with
no,
Isaiah Thomas. It was the grind to get it going, but you were doing what you cared about. And all those little pieces led to the next step, right? And the next,
yeah.
and the breakthrough. I think people forget that, and that's really why I love these conversations, right? It's the grind that you've been through.
You have to, if you're going to succeed, especially probably even now, but I think at any time in any creative field, you have to become just bulletproof to nose. Not even to the point that they don't affect you. You have to just expect a certain amount. So, I mean, it never goes away. I mean, I guess if you're Stephen King or John Grisham or something, they're not rejecting your pitches. But even now, even after Macho Man just came out, it was a really big success. I mean, it got rejected by like 8 or 9 publishers, and before that, it was a bunch of you know people who said that nobody would even do a book on a wrestler that died in 2012, and then you know, and it's like as you go in my next book, I wanted to move into novels. I hadn't written a novel before. I recently sold it, but they'll all tell you like you can't go from nonfiction to. There's always people who
Yeah.
will tell you with 100% certainty that what you are trying to do is stupid. It can't be done. It shouldn't be done. You're making a mistake. Don't even try. And when you get to a certain point, and we're in our mid 40s, you just have to be laughing because you kind of look at them, and they're only, that may be like, someone may tell you, and I'm using a real experience, like, look, Finkel, like you're really good in this genre of these nonfiction books. Like find your next athlete or somebody and write it. And I really was just a Macho Man was like a true bucket list biography. I
Yeah.
wanted to go into fiction. I have so many ideas creatively I wanted to do. And I said that's what I wanted to do. And so, someone you'll pitch one and they're like, well, what other fiction books have you done? It's like, well, none, but I've done all these books. It's like, it's that transition. It's really hard. The readers don't follow you. And I'm like, I have a newsletter of almost 30,000 people that says otherwise. Every book I've done, I've had a dozen people say no. I just have to laugh at the first dozen no's because every single time I've heard all the books on my shelf, the 12 books I did started with a half a dozen no's. They all happen if you just keep pushing. So whenever I hear people telling people no, I'm always like, why be that? Like, if you have to say no for like, hey, I'm not going to publish your book. It's not right for us. That's fine. I actually would rather have someone be like, hey, like, good luck. This is it. But when they tell you like what you're doing is not the way to go, at our age with the success that if you've had any level of success,
Yeah.
you just laugh. You have to
Yeah.
laugh because it's not true. They're wrong. It's a fact that they're wrong. Otherwise, nothing would happen. Like
That's
in
great,
any
man.
field,
That is great. No, that's what people need to hear, and I think, I have a daughter going off to college and one in high school, and it's like you got to be prepared to face the no's and grind it out, and find your way and do.
Challenge them.
Yeah.
I have love because you get confidence. You get a confidence to challenge. So someone will say, I was pitching this book and someone's like, have you considered making the protagonist a female? And it's like, no, I have not,
Mhm.
because this is the book I wanted to write. I know the best way to do it, and it's great. It's going to be great. No, I'm like, well, I think you're gonna have a hard time selling it. As that's like, and I then instead of just like it's like instead of just accepting that as a whatever criticism, I always like to say, what are the 3 reasons why you feel this way? Like I'm open to listening
Right.
to a valid like if you're just saying it to say it, I don't care. But when you challenge some of these people, you realize that there actually is nothing behind it.
Yeah.
They just don't want to do the thing. They don't have the confidence in it. Um, they don't believe in you or them. They're misreading the market. They're misreading whatever. So unless a valid reason to listen to someone if they're telling you no is when they give you real actionable things like, well, here's why. And I'm making well in 2025 X percentage of books that did this had this kind of protagonist and this and this and this and this and this and this. Oh, well, okay, that's actually really interesting. I still might not do it, but I appreciate where you're coming from. Most people are just negative jerks. Like they just don't want you to succeed, man.
Yeah.
And they don't want to put their ass on the line to help you succeed. So it's way easier to just say some broad thing. And again, when you have a string of successes that are all built on a no to start, you almost want to get a few no's under your belt on the project because then you're actually doing all right.
Yeah, yeah, that's perseverance, man. It's perseverance and things, and you're also challenging yourself, into new things, right? You're talking about going from nonfiction to fiction, and
Right.
you write about being a dad now. You've kind of, not exclusively, but you've transitioned, and the Life of Dad book is another one. I just wanted 2 more I wanted to ask you about, which
Yeah.
I, of course, have been reading, and I've just loved it. You did that with a partner, and how did that? Come about?
Yeah, sorry, it's my dog.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, so Life of Dad is interesting because it came about through a different book, dude. I was doing I did this book, so self-publishing in the sense of you could get a book out into the world without a lot of help came in like 2008 or 9 through basically like Kindle Direct Publishing. So
Mhm.
I always look at books like, and again, I'm not comparing myself to like some A-list actor, but you have actors who will be like, I'm going to do Batman for the masses and then an indie project for me over the course of the summer. And you'll probably never see this, or maybe I'll go for an Oscar or whatever. And I always thought that that was a cool thing to do for books because a Macho Man book or a Hoops Heist, it takes a year and a half to write and research. It's forever to come out. But in the middle, creatively, you just get bored and bogged down. And it's nice to be like, okay, I've been grinding away. I did 300 interviews for Hoops Heist or whatever. Like, I just want to write this goofy book on something. And
Mhm.
so when my second kid was born, my fitness background and stuff, I was like, you're up late, you don't have time. So I wrote this book called The Dadvantage, and it's like how to stay in shape on no sleep, no time, and no equipment. It was basically like how to do little micro workouts throughout the day. Before that was even a thing. I know now it's actually like a kind of a thing, but back
Yeah.
then it wasn't. And I wanted to do it myself. meaning I owned it. I just put it as a digital book. I never printed it. I wanted to learn what it was like to put a book out yourself. At that point, it was really new. The idea of being able to Amazon was even somewhat new, but the idea of being able to have someone that I know design the cover, because I had plenty of talented people in magazines, have someone I know to edit it. Again, I had plenty of people who could edit it, and then just create a file, basically like a PDF, that you could then put on Amazon and somebody could just buy for $14.99. With crazy. Like you remove the whole gatekeeper. I don't have to pitch this book. I don't have to find out if a publisher likes it or an agent likes it or a manager likes it. I don't have to find shelf space. I can just put it into this world. And so I did that book, and it got some pretty good notoriety. I was still at Muscle and Fitness at the time, so I had a lot of my contacts sort of just in the general media space to talk about it with. And I ended up going on this podcast called Life of Dad with Art Eddy, good friend of mine now, 15 years later. And we just talked about the Dadvantage. It was funny. The show was about to take off. Like literally, I think if you look way back in their podcast archive history, because I eventually became a co-host with Art for a few years, it's like somebody you hadn't heard of, somebody you hadn't heard of, me, also somebody you hadn't heard of, another person, and then like Shaq, Tim Duncan, Mark Cuban. Like it just took off. Like they just started getting a lot of play there. And so when Art and I had a really good time, again, kind of like Nate, like we did like conversation like this and stayed in touch. And when his co-host was leaving to do something else, he's like, hey, you want to do some guest things to see how it would go? And we did them together. And then he had already done, 100 of these big names, and I did a bunch with him. We did a show called Lunch Break, and it was just two dads talking at lunch. And, back when everybody was experimenting with Facebook Live, and this is kind of when it was all new. And I was like, we should really turn these interviews into a book. Like I remember Tim Ferriss did this book called Tools of Titans, where he essentially just took all the podcasts and took the smart pieces from each one into like a 2-page spread and then did it. And it was genius because
I have that book. It's good.
I
enjoyed it.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
And my pitch literally was, this is the Life of Dad version of Tools of Titans.
So you pulled those pieces. That makes
I'm telling you, this is honest truth. I had this idea. I put a normal proposal together. I went on LinkedIn. I found I didn't think I needed my agent for any of this stuff. I was like, this is such a no-brainer book. I found there was a book. I don't remember the book that I saw. So the key, anyone listening, is if you want to get in touch with people who actually can move books, you go to the Barnes and Noble library and you read books that are in this space, that are in your genre, that you're thinking about writing. And you pull the book and you go to the acknowledgments. And the writer of the book will thank the editor who made it possible, the publisher who made it happen. Go find that editor. If you have your ducks in a row, and it really makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So I went in there, found a bunch of fatherhood books, and I found one editor was mentioned a few times at Simon & Schuster. And I was like, I wonder if she's on LinkedIn. And she was. And I wrote literally that line, like, hey, Tim Ferriss' Tools of Titans sold like 7 million copies. We have this podcast, 5 million downloads, Life of Dad version. You guys would be perfect for it. You wrote this book, you published this book, and this book. Let's do it. And like that morning, the next morning, she was like, this sounds really interesting. Let's have a call. And a week later, we signed the contract to do it.
That's awesome.
Now, that's the only book in my whole life that's happened with. We happened to have 150 A-list interviews with these big names that Art already did most of the work for. But you got to find those opportunities where it's like, this is a no-brainer version of something else that's successful. And that's something no one was going to say no to. And I knew that. That's why I went right to a big Simon & Schuster. That is I listed, here's our top 50 interviews we already have done. Like, we're done. And it starts with Shaq and Mark Hamill and Dale Earnhardt Jr. It's just A-lister after A-lister in a bunch of different fields. And it's like, okay. So anyway, that book was so funny to pitch because we did that. And then it was like, we don't even have a framework. Like, I had to then go in and create what this is going to look like. Yeah. And then it was like, very easy to write. We're going to pull out the greatest insights and impactful comments from 100 of our best guests. And then Art and I are just slogging through these podcasts, re-listening. This is before you could transcribe any of this stuff.
Yeah, right.
There was no otter. There was no dragon speak. It was just like brutal listening to ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, that's really good. And then, so that took a lot longer to write than I thought. But anyway, that's the story.
Well, it's good, man. It's good because there's a lot of, it's all A-listers in there talking about being a dad. The last thing on the dad piece that I wanted to mention is in Midlife Mail. I read this and I didn't even know, again, make the connection. It was you writing it, but a few months ago, maybe you wrote about the last bike ride to school that you so you take your son to school and your daughter previously, but you take them to school via bike, and then
Yeah,
they've outgrown that, right? And
yeah, yeah.
you wrote about that, and I think any parent, it just like pulls on their heartstrings to hear about that and read about that. I thought that
Yeah,
was
that was a
great.
moment. Yeah, thank you. That was, we moved to Florida in like 2000. Right, it was during COVID. We'd planned on moving way before. It just happened to be during all that stuff. And while we were looking for our house that we ended up buying, we rented a place, and I could bike the kids to school. I've always been able, luckily, I've been able to work from home with what I do, which is great.
Mhm.
Um, since like 2019 or so. So it took a while, but eventually that was what I wanted to do. And I never where I lived when we lived in Texas, the kids took on the bus was right at the corner of the street. It was no big deal. So I didn't even think about it. We were right next to the middle school if they had gone to middle school there when I lived in Dallas. When we moved here, the house we rented just happened to be like a half mile from the school. And I was talking to just some parents in the neighborhood. I was like, "Do you guys drive the kids? What do you do?" And they were like, "No, we all just bike the kids to school. It takes 10 minutes." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So I started biking my son and daughter. And then when we bought our house, the middle school, the elementary school at the time, I think my daughter was in third and my son was in second or something like that, or fourth and
Mhm.
what a third. Anyway, the school was just at that distance where it was kind of a pain. It was like 1.4 miles away, which is not far, but also with a 6 and 8 year old or seven and not like they're fighting that you want to do it.
Yeah,
And I was like, you know what? I did the first day I drove and it was miserable to pick up. It was a 35-minute ride to
right,
go 2.8
right.
miles. I was like, I'm never doing this again.
Yeah.
So from that day forward, we biked, and so I biked my son and daughter to school for 3 years, and then my son for four, I believe, or maybe 4 or 5, and it was just like the greatest. I mean,
Mhm.
not every day was great. I won't even pretend that. Like, I
Right.
mean, there were plenty of days where they would fight. I remember there was I wrote about it in the piece. There was a long stretch where my daughter was just as she wanted to go so fast that he couldn't keep up, but I can't just leave him because he was still in like training wheels or whatever. So it was like I'm literally, biking in the middle and telling her to slow down, telling him to speed up while other parents are biking to school, and it's this whole thing. But once we got past that section, and my daughter didn't love the biking to school. She just did it. It's too hot. She started to get into, fifth grade, her hair and wanted to look
Yeah,
nice. And it was
yeah,
like, I get it. Florida, it's hot. You're
yeah.
sweating. It's gross. Um, but the last year, so this was already 2 years ago when I was biking my son, I could just like this, once we turned into the final part of the school year after January had turned, I was like, I don't have a lot of days left of doing this. Like, this is, it's a good 25 minutes of my morning because I still have to bike home. I'm
Right.
sweaty and like
Yeah.
I get up early and work out. So it was kind of like I'd get up, work out, have a little protein shake, and then do the bike ride with them. But it was time consuming. But I would just have the greatest conversations with my son about everything from WWE to their, favorite insects to space to GI Joe when I was a kid to whatever YouTube thing he's watching to like ice cream flavors to wolves fighting to like it doesn't matter. When you're driving biking with a 9, 10-year-old boy, the topics are just endless. What music we like and what was it like when I was a kid, and you just have these 20 minutes of uninterrupted just YouTube biking casually on the way to school. And I kind of knew the last week that it was going to hit me. We used to do this thing. I don't know if anybody uh, follows wrestling still, but there's this guy called LA Knight now. He's like a big wrestler. He does this thing
Mhm.
called LA Knight. Yeah. And he points like three different ways and does it. And so the whole year, my son is a wrestling fan. The way the school would work, I would drop him off. I would get to the school, but then they didn't let parents into like where the bikes are and all that because it'd be a mess. So we let him off this one area. He walks, I don't know, 45 seconds to where they put the bikes away and then another 50 feet to get into the school. And he would put his bike away. And right before he would turn, he would do like LA Night,
Yeah.
yeah. And he would
Yeah.
point to me and I would point to him. We did it every day, like literally every day. And then we get to that last week and we're doing it. And then the last day, I just start bawling, dude. Like, I know biking. I'm like, this is the last one. He's like, this is so weird. He has like a school party he's going to, and it's not
Yeah.
computing with him like what it means to me at the moment. But I gave him this huge hug like I always did, and he starts going and he puts his bike away and he's got his nice shirt on because they're doing like a thing out. They have like field days after last day of school or whatever. And we do LA and yeah, and he turns to walk and it's like in a movie where like almost like in my head like the music starts
Yeah.
and like this is the last time he's ever going to do this and I'm ever going to do this. And when I tell you I was a wreck for like 25 minutes, like it was a full on blubbering, disgusting grown man, just like,
Yeah.
my son, that's it.
Yeah.
And he was only going to sixth grade. It's not like his childhood was over or anything. But man,
But the
it
biking
wrecked me.
The biking was in. But the great thing of hearing that story, John, is that I think that you recognized it at the time, that
Yeah.
you could recognize it because a lot of times it's later we recognize those things, right? That you
Yeah.
recognized it at the time. And that's the kind of writing you do, right? The real life stuff.
Yeah.
And depends where other people are in their lives, but that resonated with me. So I appreciated that.
And I do. It's like I don't give advice. And Greg and I always joke. And he's like very much like, this is how you do things, and I've tried and error and all that stuff. And he's so good at that, and I'm not. We have different strengths, which is why we I think we work very well together. And one of my things is just like, I don't know a lot, but if you have a chance to bike your kids to school when they're in elementary school, do it.
Yeah.
I don't care if you have to go to work late for a little bit. You do not get the time back. There's only one time in your kid's life when they'll even want to do this with you.
Right.
And even if you only do it Fridays, even if you can't figure everything out, if there's any dad listening, your kids are 6, just find. I get people who live far away. There's a million reasons you can't do it. But if you can find a way to do it regularly, once a week, once a month, just a thing, you will just never, ever regret it. You will remember it forever.
Yeah, that's great advice. I had a neighbor tell me, 'cause my girls are a little older. I had a neighbor whose daughters have graduated, high school, and I told him this is in the fall that I was going to a cross country meet, and he's
Uh-huh.
like, "Man, I wish I had a cross country meet to go to."
I know.
Like I
Yeah.
mean, so it's good to recognize that in the moment.
Yep.
Okay, one more thing. Your book, 1996, you wrote
Yes.
about the greatest sports year ever. And
Hmm.
when I saw that, I thought, really, was it? And you instantly put on your own perspective. And I was like, okay, Mariners 95, that was awesome.
Yeah.
96, those Sonics, right? So, um, but you run through these names from 1996, right? You don't even need full names, but Tiger, Tyson, Jeter, Jordan, Shaq, Kobe, Gretzky, Agassi, Serena, the Olympics, the Cowboys, the Yankees. I mean, all of that happened in 1996, which was right in your wheelhouse, right? So I mean, when did you realize like I'm gonna write a book about the greatest sports year ever?
This ties everything we're talking about together in the whole pay your dues thing. If I told you, and I see your face and how much you enjoyed this book, how many people told me no one's going to give a shit about a book written about a biography of a sports year, you wouldn't even believe me. And I said, you're wrong.
Yeah,
There was millions of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it was a seminal year. And when you talk about the fact that before 1996, nobody in the sports or pop cultural zeitgeist knew or cared about names like Tiger Woods, names like Kobe Bryant, names like Allen Iverson, names like Serena Williams, the WNBA, MLS, Tyson out of jail. Like these are things. There was no conversation. Tiger Woods didn't exist for collective for the for general society. These people who are now cultural icons and who you can't have a conversation about their sport or about sports in general without them. Pre 96, they were not a part of the conversation, right? So if you look at all that, in addition to the Cowboys, right? The Cowboys, all those guys, Troy Aikman's still a superstar
yes,
right now from those Cowboys
yes,
teams.
Dion.
Obviously the Braves and the Yankees games that
Yeah,
they had, the series that they had, and like in addition to all of those things, and then the movies that came out, Happy Gilmore 2 right now
yeah,
came out in 1996, the first one. Like that's a movie that right now matters, and it came out that year. And Jerry Maguire and all these sports movies, and so it's so gratifying, honestly, because it's just I want to like record this and take it to these idiots who
yeah.
are like, I don't know. I mean, what about other sports years? And it's like that's not the pitch.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like that's
Yeah,
I'm
do the
telling you why this
research.
is good.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you reading it and bringing it up.
Yeah.
All these things are always, and I don't live in a big I told you so world with this stuff, but I smile because we were just talking about that, about paying your dues. And when you say when did the idea come, I actually honed it down. It was originally going to be I had a great title, man. It was going to be called Decade of Icons.
Hmm.
And it was going to be the 90s and like the quintessential 90s icons. And it was basically the same people. But as I started doing the research, I was like, most of these we could talk about in like a year, which kind of makes it a little more compelling. Now, I never
Mhm.
read a biography of a year. which was my little kind of creative twist on it.
Sure.
And my agent at the time, I give him credit. Joe was like, "What if we just really dial this in and basically sell like this is the greatest sports year of all time, like almost like sports, AD and BC. Like there's before 1996 and after 1996." And I was like, that really dialed it. I think a Decade Icons would have been a very big book.
Yeah.
This one I was able to keep to like 65,000 words. But once we figured it out, that was when I was like, this is again like this idea will resonate. And whenever I told people about it, they had one of two reactions. They were around my age and they were like, "Oh yeah, dude." They started doing what you did, like the Sonics and this and Jordan and all these things. Or they started just instantly being like, "What about 91?" And I'm like, then you go write a book on
Yes.
91. I'm
Right.
writing a book on
Right.
1996.
Yeah. That's great,
You know,
man. It's look, I clearly I'm a fan of sports. I like biographies, I like dad topics, you hit on all those things. And so I'll put links to your website, which kind of covers all this. And then you briefly touched on your newsletter, Books and Biceps. That's a big following. Did you say 30,000?
almost 30,000. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's like my personal, I just, when you're an author, Amazon or Barnes and Noble, they don't give you the names or addresses of anybody who buys your book. And it's just
Mhm.
general business I've learned, like to know your customers basically. And so, I realized early on and from talking to some other authors, like you never want to start promoting your next book from scratch, basically. Like if you, especially now, when you can have a newsletter list of emails of the people who bought it. So I started the newsletter with like, I don't know, 17 or 18 people in my Gmail account or Hotmail account. And I was like, everybody who buys a book, I'm going to talk about them and go on Twitter and go on all these things and talk about it. And what I'm going to do is recommend, because I read a lot. So I'm just going to make it, I found the most successful writing and newsletters or whatever are things that naturally fit into your life. If it becomes work, it becomes homework, it becomes something you don't enjoy doing. So I was like, these are the things I like the most, working out and reading. And so I called it Books and Biceps. Originally, it was called Finkel's Fast Five, just a complete ripoff of Tim Ferriss. And then I realized
Right.
nobody knows who Finkel is and nobody gives a shit about his Fast Five. I need to like really dial in what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Um, and so I changed it to Books and Biceps around issue, I don't know, 80 or 90. Now there's like 360 issues. Every
Yeah.
Friday it comes
Right
out.
on.
But I share a book that I'm reading, a workout or workout motivation thing that I read. Sometimes I call my gym the Flex Factory, my garage gym.
Yeah.
So a workout that I did or a workout that I found or just some meatheady thing. We call our readers sophisticated meatheads.
Yeah. That's great.
And that's really all it is. And then when I have a book coming out, I'll put the pre-order links and sell the hell out of it there, of course. But I recommend 50 other people's books a year. So I get to meet a lot of cool authors and do a lot of author interviews. And yeah, we do these challenges all the time. Like I do a read more, lift more challenge where it's like I'll pair a workout a day with a book. So read 10 pages a day, do the workout, you get to read a book, and by the end of the month, you've done all this stuff. So
That's cool.
it's like my personal little just readership book club
Yeah.
that has grown, almost to 30,000 people now. And it's really cool. You mentioned the midlife male thing, which is awesome. It's like they complement each other really, really well. So all my columns that I call in my monologue column in midlife male, I put in Books and Biceps. And then it's like, we have a lot of people who will read one and then find the other. But midlife male is far more of like a global, like we're going to be like the Men's Health. We're going to have
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of readers for that. Books and Biceps is my book club, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
that's cool.
you want to get to know me personally. This is what I'm reading. This is how I'm working out. Like, let's do this. And here's my next books. Midlife male is going to, take over the world for 40 plus guys.
It's great, man. It's great stuff. I appreciate it. I appreciate your writing, and I'll put links to your social media, to your website, to the newsletter. And thanks for taking the time, bringing back the memories for me. And I think a lot of people, certainly in my greater circle, are going to enjoy it too. So
Yeah.
appreciate you being on here and sharing your thoughts.
I appreciate you having me. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for reading all the stuff. And we'll reconvene when the Sonics come back. We'll have a celebratory podcast.
It's a deal. Thanks, John.
Sounds good.